What does a legend wish for when the lights begin to fade? Just weeks before his death, the world of rock lost its heartbeat. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the godfather of heavy metal, took his final breath at 76 years old. With it, a chapter of music history closed forever. But Ozzy was never just a musician. He was a storm, a revolution, a man who turned chaos into an empire and ruled it with fire. His passing sent a tidal wave of grief across generations. Fans wept, friends stood silent, and his family, for them, it was as if time itself had stopped. Yet Ozzy didn't fade quietly. He left the way he lived, loud, fearless, unforgettable. In those final weeks, he made a request so raw, so unexpected, even those closest to him were shaken. It was a final dream, clung to with every ounce of his fading strength, and only Sharon, the love of his life, could make it happen. The final wish. The Osbourne home was quiet in those last days. Curtains swayed in the summer breeze, but inside time seemed to move slower, as though the world held its breath. Sharon sat beside him, her hand wrapped around his. Ozzy, once a whirlwind on stage, now spoke in low tones, not because he had nothing to say, but because his body couldn't keep up with his thoughts. Parkinson's had robbed him of strength. The same man who once slept across arenas in leather and fire now struggled just to sit up. Still, his mind was sharp, his wit intact. "This body's broken," he joked with a crooked smile, "but the brain's still partying." Each morning he asked, not for painkillers, not for doctors, just tea and Sharon. Together they sat in silence, drifting between decades of memories. He laughed about his first shaky gig, remembered the streets of Aston, and spoke tenderly of his children and grandchildren. Then came the moment Sharon would never forget. One evening, as the sun burned orange over the countryside, Ozzy turned to her and whispered, "I don't want them to remember a man in a wheelchair. I want to give them one last roar." Where it all began, it wasn't just a request, it was a vow, a final act of rebellion from a man who had spent his life defying the odds. Sharon's mission. Sharon Osbourne had been more than a wife. She was Ozzy's fiercest protector, his manager, his anchor. She had guided him through addictions, hospital corridors, and comebacks that seemed impossible. But now, the roles reversed. It was her mission to give him that last roar. She didn't tell anyone, not even their children. Doctors said it was impossible. Friends warned it was dangerous. Even Ozzy, in his weaker moments, begged her to let it go. But Sharon never flinched. She believed in the power of that one last night. Behind closed doors, she negotiated with managers, fought with medical staff, and begged producers for one more concert. She reassembled his old crew, chose the stadium, and arranged every detail with the precision of a general and the devotion of a wife. She carried the secret like a flame she had to shield from the wind. For Sharon, it wasn't just a performance, it was dignity. It was closure. It was love. Back to the beginning. To understand Ozzy's last dream, you have to go back. Born John Michael Osbourne in Birmingham in 1948, he grew up surrounded by poverty, soot, and the clang of factory life. He struggled with dyslexia, with self-worth, with bullying. At 17, he was jailed for burglary, convinced he had no future. But in the darkness, he found music. In 1968, with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, he formed Black Sabbath. Their sound was unlike anything heard before, heavy, ominous, primal. Critics dismissed them, but a disillusioned generation found truth in Ozzy's voice. Songs like Paranoid and Iron Man weren't just tracks. They were battle cries for kids who felt invisible. By 1979, Ozzy was fired for substance abuse. Most thought it was the end. Instead, he began a solo career that turned him into a legend. Blizzard of Oz, Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley. Each song was proof that chaos could be reborn as power. He stumbled, relapsed, and rose again. And always, the music remained. the Prince of Darkness. Through the 80s and 90s, Ozzy redefined himself. No More Tears showed his depth. Mama, I'm Coming Home revealed his heart. He won Grammys, earned stars on Walks of Fame, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, both with Sabbath and as a solo artist. And then came MTV's The Osbournes. Suddenly, the world saw not just the Prince of Darkness, but a forgetful, funny, strangely relatable father. The chaos of his home became must-watch television. Ozzy wasn't just a rock star anymore. He was a cultural icon. But even then, one thing never changed. He never stopped singing. Surgeries, tremors, and a Parkinson's diagnosis in 2020 couldn't silence him. In 2022, he released Patient Number 9, reminding the world that his fire still burned. Birmingham's farewell. When word spread of Ozzy's final concert, Birmingham rose to the occasion. The city that once branded him a dropout now embraced him as its son. For months, murals, tributes, and festivals filled the streets. Buses flashed, "Thank you, Ozzy." Fans arrived in waves from around the world. Villa Park, the chosen venue, became sacred ground. And yet few knew the truth. Sharon kept the secret. This wasn't just a concert. It was goodbye. The final roar. On July 5th, 2025, the lights dimmed. The crowd of 40,000 held its breath. Then, like a king returning to his throne, Ozzy appeared. Not walking, but seated proudly on a black steel chair, rolled onto the stage. The eruption of the crowd shook the stadium. He opened with "Mama, I'm Coming Home." His voice cracked, but each lyric was a farewell, etched in sound. Then came Crazy Train. As the riff thundered, Ozzy smiled. A small, knowing smile that said, "This is where I belong." No long speeches, no theatrics. Just raw music, fireworks, and silence broken by tears. Sharon had given him the one thing no doctor could, the chance to die as an artist, not a patient. The world mourns. 17 days later, Ozzy passed away. The world froze. Tributes poured in from Elton John, Rod Stewart, Paul McCartney, and Tony Iommi. London's Tower Bridge lit up with his silhouette. Times Square flashed his name. Fans sang his songs in choirs, vigils, and stadiums across the globe. Sharon, holding his wedding ring in her trembling hands, said only, he didn't just want to live forever. He wanted to matter forever. Ozzy Osbourne's life was wild, reckless, and legendary. But his end was quiet, dignified, and full of grace. His final wish wasn't about nostalgia. It was about rewriting his last verse with triumph. Sharon made sure he didn't leave as a frail patient, but as the Prince of Darkness who turned pain into power and chaos into music. His last whisper became a roar. His final bow was thunder. And though Ozzy may no longer sing, his voice echoes louder than ever, in stadiums, in headphones, and in the millions of hearts still screaming his name. If you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe. More untold stories and hidden histories of legends like Ozzy are on the way. And trust me, you don't want to miss the next one.